New Arts and Media Studios in Milwaukee. I'm Charles Purcell. This is The Log. Hey, a correction first out of the gate here. We gave tribute to the great Jimmy Carter on last week's episode, and we got the birthday wrong. He turned 100 years old on October 1st, and for some reason I thought it was September 29th. And I said that a couple times, and I was very wrong, and so there's that correction. October 1st is the birthday of the great Jimmy Carter. Happy birthday, many more. Hey, Cornel West made some news. He posted this 2 Mondays ago. A pretty lengthy statement. I'm going to read part of it. Basically, what he's doing is he's giving permission to his voters to vote for Kamala Harris. He understands that there's a difference between the Republicans and the Democrats. He understands that in swing states, it can make a difference, and it's more important to stop the Orange Menace than it is for him to get your vote. At least that's the way I'm taking this. Here's the way he wrote it. Again, this is a segment of what he wrote. I refuse to demonize those who deeply disagree with me. Although neither Harris nor Trump give a damn about nearly 20,000 precious Palestinian children slaughtered in less than a year, or priceless U.S. children, disproportionately black, living in abject poverty. By the way, I agree with him 100% on this entire statement. I do acknowledge, and here it is, I do acknowledge that an anti-Trump vote for Harris is not identical to an anti-Harris vote for Trump in the swing states. Hard-won reproductive freedoms for women, the fragile, peaceful transfer of power, and waning civil liberties for future grassroots organizing matter. So I take my castigated prophetic stand. I don't know what that means. Castigated prophetic stand. I'll have to look that up. I take my castigated prophetic stand and invite others to think for themselves and come down where they may. Okay, now, if you interpret that the same way I do, he understands there's a difference between Trump and Harris. He's giving us, in the swing states, permission to vote for Harris. No hard feelings. He thinks maybe we should, although he says come down where you may. All right. He can't come right out and endorse Harris. I kind of wish he would. I wish he'd speak more clearly, but that's what he said. He makes a point that I've been trying to make now for a long, long time. Waning civil liberties for future grassroots organizing. That's what we have to protect. We got to protect the future. In other words, a vote for Harris now at least keeps us in the game. It creates a future where at least we have some sort of voice. So I agree with Cornel West, or he agrees with us. Again, we've been saying this for a long time. At least keeping the Orange Menace out of the White House gives us a fighting chance in the future, and that's what he's saying. He understands that. So, in swing states, as we've said many times, if you're not in a swing state, please vote your conscience. And I hope that means Claudia de la Cruz, the socialist candidate, Jill Stein, the Green candidate, Cornel West, the independent candidate. Yeah, if you're not in a swing state, vote your conscience. Absolutely, 100%. If you are in a swing state, you now have Cornel West and my permission to vote strategically, which we normally would discourage. Okay, so we reached the anniversary of October 7, of course, that very terrible day when Hamas fighters attacked Israeli civilians. And, of course, it then triggered a full year of slaughter from Israel just taking it to Gaza. So, of course, the anniversary has to be recognized. And as you would expect, the U.S. media did mostly a pretty bad job of doing that. October 7th was bad enough all by itself. Just in and of itself, it's a terrible day when 1,200 people get killed violently. But there are a couple things that are just weird about this. One, calling it, as you're going to hear, or as you heard, the deadliest day for Jews since the Holocaust. Well, technically, yeah, that's true. And let me be clear at the outset here. I'm not condoning or forgiving or dismissing any of what Hamas has done. You and I have talked plenty about that, the whole analogy of gangs and riots. And listen to last week's episode if you don't know what I'm talking about. The point here now, I'm talking about language and the U.S. media and world media for that matter. Comparing it to the Holocaust is just vile. It's disrespectful to victims of the Holocaust, where 6 million Jews, 6 million, not 1,200. And yes, 1,200 is terrible. It's not 6 million. They're both terrible. One is 6 million, one is 1,200. When you put them next to each other, the deadliest day since the Holocaust. You can't do that because it equates the two. So first of all, it's simply untrue. It's saying something that's not true when the job of a journalist is to say true things. And as important, maybe more important, it's just a slap in the face to those who were lost, to families and survivors of the Holocaust. To compare the two, it's ridiculous. And then, like I say, it was bad enough. You don't have to lie about it. Right away, we got these lies about on October 7th, there were these decapitations and fetuses ripped out of the bellies of pregnant women. And it was just the most vile, horrible stuff. Well, it turned out none of it was true. They found zero evidence of any of that. So again, it's bad enough by itself, but then for some reason you have to make it even worse. You have to make up lies to make it even worse, to make Hamas look even more monstrous. Goebbels would be blushing at this point, the amount of propaganda and lying that modern politicians and nation states are happy to engage in. There's also, we should point out here at the anniversary, the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu propped up Hamas for years because he liked having an enemy. That was good for him politically. It was a built-in excuse to occupy Gaza and to act like a goddamn tyrant. And it was a great excuse to totally give up on the two-state solution, which he gave up on a long time ago. And now he and his higher-ups there in the government are just open about it. They used to be a little bit coy about it. Now they're just totally open. They've given up entirely on a two-state solution, which is the only path to peace ever. You can either have constant warfare, or you can have complete occupation, apartheid. So, yeah, Netanyahu propped up Hamas for years. And still no explanation when days and weeks after the attack of October 7, the world media was asking Netanyahu, how did this happen? Tell us about the intelligence failures. And to this day, not a peep. Oh, well, there's no time to talk about that now. We have to win this war first. So a year on, we have no explanation as to the intelligence failures and the military failures and the delay in response. It took them hours and in some case days to respond, depending on what area you were in. So Israel has everything to answer for. And now in the year since, of course, war crimes left and right. Netanyahu's a war criminal. 42,000 dead, probably 3 times that, actually, with disease, famine, and preventable deaths because the healthcare system has just been decimated. The actual death count is probably easily in the hundreds of thousands. And now they're doing the same thing in Lebanon. I just saw an aerial picture this morning. Just sickening. Whole neighborhoods, whole towns just flattened. So Netanyahu is as bad a war criminal as we've seen in modern history. The U.S. has been funding him for a year. The U.S. needs to cut him off right at the knees, just cut off Israel. No more money, no more weapons, no more diplomatic cover, no more nothing. So the October 7th date comes and goes, and things just get worse. Speaking of U.S.-Israel, Joe Biden, I gave him credit a year ago. I said, well, good for you, Joe. At least you said the right thing. The first words out of his mouth were, okay, October 7th, that was bad. Don't make the same mistake we made on 9/11, where you just start dropping bombs and shooting people. You just can't do that. It doesn't work. Learn from our mistake. Netanyahu didn't listen, of course. And Bob Woodward has a new book out, just released this week, called War. And in it, he talks about, I guess he got some quotes from some phone calls between Biden and Netanyahu, where Biden's just dropping the F-bomb left and right. It's like, what the Netanyahu? What are you doing? But to no avail. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see what goes, but it's bad and getting worse. Speaking of bad and getting worse, I had a Milton joke. You know, Hurricane Milton is bearing down on Florida as we speak. And, of course, the first thing I thought was the character Milton from Office Space. You remember the guy, Milton, whose office kept getting moved and wanted his stapler back? That Milton. And without giving away the end, I know it's an old movie, but I still don't want to do a spoiler because maybe you haven't seen it yet. Maybe you're a young person who's never seen it, and I want you to enjoy it. So I'm going to recommend, if you've never seen Office Space, it's a very funny movie, and it's a great, great social satire. And there's a character, Milton, who's very funny. And at one point in the movie, I won't tell you anything more, he's on a beach on the Gulf of Mexico. Okay, so I thought I'd make a funny joke about Milton being on the Gulf of Mexico. As soon as I heard that earlier this week that Milton had grown into a Category 5 and was really going to do some serious damage, I took down my joke because I don't do that. I do believe, especially when it comes to satire, you can make a joke about anything, literally anything, the most serious thing in the world, if your joke is aimed properly at the ne'er-do-wells, the villains of the story. If you aim your joke at the villain of the story, you can joke about anything, the way Mel Brooks joked about Hitler. Of course, that I believe. I wish I'm not a professional comedian. I wish professional comedians, more of them, understood this. My joke was just a funny thing. It was just a little funny play on, the name Milton being on the Gulf, and it just made light of the whole situation, which is what made it inappropriate, which is why I took it down. You know what I didn't take down? I posted a little reminder just from this story is only a couple months old. It's not like ancient news. In fact, the law just took effect in July. Headline, Florida Governor DeSantis signs bill that deletes climate change from state law. You can't even acknowledge it. You can't use the words. He's a climate denier. It's shameful in the face of these horrible hurricanes. So, yeah, like we said many times, there's no such thing as a natural disaster. Most of what happens is because we allowed conditions or created conditions. So some of this severe weather never should have happened in the first place, the fires, the droughts, the hurricanes. And if and when they do, because of course we've always had them, we just haven't had them this often and this severe. But if something bad hits, the poor people are hurt more than rich people, by and large. I got nothing but love for the victims and for the responders. I got nothing but love for those folks. But I have nothing but disdain for these repugnant office holders who deny climate in the first place, and then they vote against FEMA funding. And just to flesh out a little something I said last week, I was in the 89 San Francisco earthquake, and most of the damage was in the Marina District, which never should have existed, basically. Worshipping at the altar of profit, they built housing on landfill they filled out into the bay, which never ever should have been there. It was soft, sandy landfill, and then when a strong earthquake comes, bang, down they come, pipes burst, fires blaze. Yeah, most of the damage in San Francisco in 89 was in the Marina District, which literally shouldn't have existed. And then generally speaking, repugnants are the ones who they cut corners and cut regulation. We've heard stories about Helene, that there was damage that shouldn't have happened, but because of that, cut corners and lower lightweight regulations or ignored. They vote to not fund things like FEMA. They deny climate. So, yeah, there's no such thing as a natural disaster. I saw an interesting post today an overhead shot of people evacuating the Tampa area, bumper to bumper, stop and go traffic. It's already started to rain, and these people just getting themselves out. And I don't have it in front of me here, but it said the Post said something like any actual civilized nation, a real government, wouldn't give evacuation orders. They would go in with buses, with transportation, and evacuate people. That's what a civilized nation would do with a functioning government. Wouldn't tell people to evacuate. You'd evacuate them. You'd go in. You'd help them. And you'd hand them vouchers for expenses and a key to a hotel room. You take care of people. But no, that's not the world we live in. We could live in that world, but we don't. Under our beautiful little capitalist system here, you can't ever have any redundancy, of course. You can't have any redundancy in the supply chain or in the labor market because it doesn't serve profit. As long as profit runs everything, you can't have any redundancy. And redundancy is exactly what you want. You want to have more supplies than you'll ever need. You want to have more people than you'll ever need. You want to have more resources than you'll ever need, just in case something, God forbid, something bad happens. So the next hurricane or the next earthquake or, God forbid, the next pandemic will be in the same place. That's where we were for COVID. No redundancies. The supply chain was a just-in-time sort of thing. Walmart kind of invented that. And in the years since, it's been sort of perfected. You only have in your inventory exactly what you need at the moment. And they got all these algorithms to figure out how to do that. So you have no fat at all. Well, fat is exactly what we need when it comes to medical supplies and emergency supplies, and again, both in the supply chain and in the labor chain. You want redundancy, but you can't have that as long as profit rules. So that's why social anarchism is the far superior system. Redundancy, yes. Profit, no. All labor can chip in because you're not tied to your employer with a ball and a chain. Everybody can chip in and not have to give up your hours at work. Everybody's ready to go. Your labor isn't trapped in ridiculous little retail situations and in factories. You just go. We could be. This is a beautiful world. It really is. It's a beautiful world filled with beautiful nature and beautiful people. And there's absolutely no good goddamn reason in the world we can't live properly. Well, let me get to a couple other things before time runs out on us today. The Orange Menace, speaking of Milton, I'm sure you've heard all of this. Just finding more things to lie about. It doesn't matter what the story is, he'll find a way to blame immigrants. So his big lie this week was that Biden and Harris stole millions or billions of dollars from emergency aid and gave it to immigrants for their housing. And of course, it was all just a big fat lie. He made it up. But like so many things, it's a case of projection because, as it turns out, in 2019, I think it was, Trump took $271 million from emergency programs, including $155 million from the disaster fund, to pay for immigration detention space. So, yeah, he did steal emergency money to lock up immigrants. And then, yeah, whenever he accuses Biden-Harris of anything, you can absolutely pretty much guarantee that he did it himself. So all the lies, and we've heard from experts and people trying to help in North Carolina and Georgia and elsewhere, that it's hurting their efforts with all of his lies and disinformation. Again, Goebbels would be just blushing at this point. Oh, and another story came out that I guess there was some big emergency in California, wildfires, I think, and he was actually withholding aid because he didn't want to give money to a blue state until his people, and we have an interview from an ex-aide who told us this, they had to go to him with a map showing him Orange County and that there's a lot of Republicans in Orange County that voted for him, and I guess that's where a lot of the money was going to. So it was only then that he said, okay. It was only then that he released the money to people who voted for him. This is who he is. What else did he do this week? We could have a little segment every week, the new lows of the Orange Menace. Speaking of Nazis, he brought up the whole genetic superiority thing again. Immigrants have bad genes, and that's why they're murderers. Said that on a radio interview with Hugh Hewitt. Talked about Bob Woodward's new book a minute ago. He sent COVID test machines to Vladimir Putin back in May of 2020. That's when everybody here was having a really rough time finding them. Remember May of 2020 when he kept putting the responsibility back to the governors? Well, that's up to the governors to do. So governors were literally calling around the world looking for these testing machines. And at the time, it wasn't just a little packet you could buy in the store. No, these were machines. And there was a great shortage of them, and governors were searching high and low around the world to make deals for them and to find them for their citizens. And the Orange Menace sent a bunch of them over to Russia because Vladimir Putin was very worried about COVID, and he didn't want to get it. So for Putin's personal use, he sent these machines. So this comes out of Bob Woodward's book. And also, speaking of Putin, he and the Orange Menace have had at least 7 phone calls since the Orange Menace left office. I have some pretty good friends I don't speak to that often. That's twice a year. Do you have friends? I have friends like that. I'll talk to, over the years, you make lots of friends, and some stay and some go, and some kind of hang on with that, like twice a year phone call. Yeah. I consider them pretty good friends, and we have nice long conversations, and we talk about personal things, and when we hang up, we say we love each other, and I bet you have relationships like that. I do. So that's the Orange Menace and Vladimir Putin. 7 phone calls in 3.5 years. And, of course, over those years, for a good part of that time, he had classified documents, war documents, nuclear documents, in his golden chandelier bathroom at Mar-a-Lago. So, yeah, I really wonder what these conversations were about. So, these books come out, and there's a few little tidbits that are interesting. Well, one of them is that Lindsey Graham is quoted as saying that going to Mar-a-Lago, he said it's like North Korea down there. Every time the Orange Menace walks into a room, everybody stands and applauds. Nobody ever disagrees with him about anything, and they all sort of kiss his ring and kowtow. So, yeah, that's the world this guy's been living in for 4 years. Kamala Harris out doing the media, just a full-blown blitz here of media. She did 60 Minutes, she did The View, she did Colbert. What else? That podcast, what's it called? Call Her Daddy, which I confess I didn't know about. Apparently, it's the number 2 podcast behind Joe Rogan. How did I not know this? Man, I got to get up on things. But apparently it's a big thing for younger women. And it's not really a political podcast. It's the strategy that the Orange Menace has been on for quite a while, doing the young bro, the broosphere podcasts. Again, not so much about politics. These guys don't know really anything about it, but on the advice of his son Barron, I guess, this started. He's been doing a lot of these podcasts and trying to reach, as you and I have talked about quite a lot, that I think his strategy is to bring in a lot of non-voters, people who've never voted, never thought about voting, and just completely under the radar, not showing up in the polls. He can't expand his base anymore. He can't appeal to even swing voters. He can't be, I'm going to be moderate now and appeal to swing voters. It's kind of too late for that. So I think that's a big part of his strategy. And again, you and I have talked about that. And that's something here that Kamala Harris has touched on, although I broke my own rule and I put the two of them in the same sentence, and I shouldn't do that. But yeah, going on this Call Her Daddy podcast is an example of that, and probably a good idea. You want to expand the voting bloc. I didn't see the Colbert thing. I did seek out and watch The View, and that was completely predictable. She made news on that one because she unveiled her plan to provide home care for elderly folks through Medicare. And that's a good thing. That's the way the entire world ought to work. It's the only time I agree with her when she offers free stuff, because most things ought to be free, and especially necessities, basic food, healthcare, housing, especially for old people who can't work. Yeah, of course it should be free. Are we civilized people or not? Are we human beings or not? Do we have a basic floor of decency? So yeah, that's when I like her. So that was good. The 60 Minutes thing, she was, herself. I'm going to say one more time and just keep hammering this home. You don't have to like her. You don't have to like her to vote for her. She talks in kind of political speak, and she still kind of laughs nervously if she doesn't have an answer. And she's just a very, very traditional, old school politician who speaks in talking points and doesn't really answer a question straightforwardly. But my main criticism is to 60 Minutes. This is their big tradition to interview each of the two major candidates, the Republican and the Democrat. I mean, shame on them. Shame on them for shutting out Stein, West, and De La Cruz. Come on, do it. Just do it, please. Take some responsibility and be an actual news service and let us hear from the alternate candidates. But, it's not going to happen. Asked about Israel. This was interesting. They worded the question very precisely. Is Netanyahu a close ally? What a great question, because she couldn't answer it. Of course, she didn't answer it. She twisted it around and said, well, people to people, we have an alliance with Israel. But no, Netanyahu was absolutely not a close ally, and she didn't say so, so good for her on that. Still didn't come around to conditional aid on Israel. She never will. Talked about the stupid tax breaks for first-time home buyers and to open a business, and we all know what happens with that kind of Rube Goldberg kind of governing. Legislation to fight price gouging, yeah, it sounds good, but who knows how that works. She had to say, well, I'm a capitalist, like they always have to do. Biden loves to say it. They all, all of them, Obama, Clinton, they all got to make it clear, oh, well, I'm a capitalist. Nancy Pelosi has said it several times. When a growing number of Americans are coming to understand that capitalism is the problem, we're going to reach a tipping point one of these days. It's only a matter of time when the great majority of Americans are going to all look at each other and say, yeah, the emperor has no clothes. It's the elephant in the room. We know capitalism is the problem. And then politicians like Kamala Harris will come around and say, well, I think capitalism might be the problem. It'll happen someday, sooner or later, hopefully sooner. All right. So there you go. This episode and all the others can be found at charlespurcell.com or on your favorite podcast platform. Thanks to our flagship terrestrial station, River West Radio, riverwestradio.com. Contact me, Charles Purcell, at Gmail. Follow on Facebook. Thanks to Peter Donalds, who wrote and performed the theme song. All right, there it is. Love you. See ya.